Say hello to the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. Hi, I'm George Stimson, and this is the fifth installment of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. By now, we should all know why we're here, but if you don't, please go back and watch the previous four installments of this podcast. This story is a chronology, but it is also a chronology with momentum, so in order not to lose that momentum, I'm going to recap what we've gone over up to this point. The following are my interpretations of the events of the summer of 1969, based on the recollections of the persons involved in the incidents as recorded in books, court and parole hearing transcripts, police records, television and other media interviews, and news reports. On July 1, 1969, Charles Watson, a resident of Spahn Movie Ranch in the Chatsworth neighborhood of Los Angeles, went to Hollywood and engineered a swindle of a black drug dealer named Bernard Crowe. When Crowe realized he had been swindled, he called Spahn's ranch and threatened to harm the ranch and the people living there. Another resident of the ranch, Charles Manson, inadvertently intercepted this call and went to Hollywood to meet with Crowe and try to straighten out the problem. I am rejecting Watson's claim that we'd already agreed that Charlie Manson would handle this end of it, because it's not believable to me that Manson would agree to handle the dirty end of a $2,400 ripoff of someone completely unknown to him. Crowe wouldn't accept Manson's peace offer, however, and a confrontation ensued, which resulted in Manson shooting Crowe once in the abdomen as the larger man advanced on him. Manson left, believing that he had killed Crowe. As such, he believed he had taken a life in the process of trying to straighten out a problem of Charles Watson's making. Thus, Watson was indebted to Manson up to and including the point of taking a human life. Now understand, it was up to Charles Watson as to whether he honored or defaulted on that debt. Continuing with our chronology, it is just a few days after this incident, on July 4, that Linda Kasabian arrived at Spahn's ranch. She spent her first night with Charles Watson, who convinced her to steal $5,000 from the trailer where her husband and a friend were living. The next day, she did so. She also sought out Charles Manson so he would hide her when her angered husband and the friend showed up at the ranch demanding their money. We don't know for sure what Manson did to get the pair to leave empty-handed, but after their encounter with him, they did just that. And apparently the matter was so settled for them that they didn't bother to go to the police and report a theft of over $36,000 in today's money. So now, Linda Kasabian also owes Charles Manson. On July 25th, frequent Spahn's Ranch visitor Bobby Beausoleil went to the home of Gary Hinman to try to get a refund on a mescaline deal. I am not accepting the get the inheritance, or lottery winnings, or stocks and bonds, or whatever, motive, because there is no factual basis for it. That is to say, there was no inheritance. And the people who testified that it was the motive did so in exchange for having criminal charges against them dropped. The motive of Beausoleil going to Hinman's for a refund for the straight Satans, on the other hand, is not only supported by evidence, for example, the disposition of Gary Hinman's VW bus, but it has also been accepted by the California Board of Prison Terms as being true. So there is no reason to believe that it is not the reason that Beausoleil went to Hinman's. Beausoleil had been seriously and violently threatened enough by members of the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Club that he transferred that level of experience to Hinman, pistol whipping him with a large semi-automatic pistol and struggling with him on several occasions, during one of which Hinman got possession of the gun. At some point in this endeavor, a phone call was placed to Spahn's ranch requesting Charles Manson's assistance. Manson soon showed up at Hinman's residence with fellow Spahn's ranch resident Bruce Davis. Shortly thereafter, an altercation occurred which ended when Manson slashed the side of Hinman's face with a small sword. Manson and Davis then left, taking one of Hinman's cars. 2 days later, on July 27th, Bobby Beausoleil killed Gary Hinman by stabbing him once in the heart. There are two versions of the reason why Beausoleil killed Hinman. The first, told by Bobby Beausoleil, is that he killed Hinman because he feared being arrested if Hinman went to the authorities over his slashed face. The second, told by Charles Manson, is that Beausoleil killed Hinman when Hinman said he was going to report Manson for the ear slashing after he had given Manson his word that he would not. Please refer to the 4th episode of this podcast for why I accept Manson's version. Hinman's body was discovered on July 31st. On August 6, 1969, Bobby Beausoleil was arrested while in possession of Gary Hinman's Fiat. 10 days after the murder, he was still driving his victim's car. The next day, August 7th, Beausoleil was booked into the Los Angeles County Jail on a murder charge. And here we continue with our momentum-driven chronology. Soon after Beausoleil's arrest, his friends at Spahns Ranch were made aware of his situation. Likely, Beausoleil called them himself. We don't know what he told them, and we don't know anything he could have said about whatever evidence the police had against him, but they knew that he was being held for the murder of Gary Hinman. Not even 48 hours after the people at Spahns Ranch became aware of Beausoleil's arrest, 4 of them, Charles Watson, Linda Kasabian, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel, invaded the grounds and house at 10,050 Cielo Drive and killed 5 people there. Was this timing coincidental, or was this an instance of cause and effect? Could there have been some other stimulus other than Beausoleil's arrest that caused his friends to go out on that particular night? Why those people went out on that night has been the central question surrounding this entire case. Why were those 5 people murdered? What is clear, though, is that they were murdered because they had to be murdered. In other words, the persons who murdered them did so because that was the whole plan, to murder them. This wasn't a robbery turned murder or an assault turned murder. Here, on one level, the motive for the murders was to commit murders. And that's all the perpetrators did at the house. They murdered the occupants and left. With the gunshots heard by the neighbor and the encounter at the hose at Portola Drive, we know that the entire incident likely took less than 1 hour. And why should it have taken any longer? The persons who went to the Polanski residence went there for one reason only, to kill whoever was there. And that singular chore didn't take them much more than about an hour. And it didn't matter who the people were. It was going to be whoever was there. Killers and victims were strangers to each other. And this isn't just an opinion that I'm offering as fact. There is evidence that indicates it. The earliest first-hand account we had of the events which occurred at 10,050 Cielo Drive on August 9, 1969, come from participant Susan Atkins' grand jury testimony, which was given on December 6th of that year. In it, Atkins recounted her version of the crime, and it is apparent from that recollection that the victims had not seen their assailants before. After Charles Watson woke up Wojciech Frykowski on the couch, Frykowski looked at him and asked, "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" When Jay Sebring was ushered into the living room, he asked Watson et al., "What are you doing here?" If Atkins' testimony is accurate, and in this instance there is no reason to believe that it is not, both men clearly did not recognize the strangers or have any idea what they might be doing in the house. And in none of the other recollections of the perpetrators, whether in trial testimonies, books, parole hearing appearances, or media interviews, have they indicated that there was any sign that their victims had any idea who they were or why they were there. So, there was no previous connection between the killers and victims that would have led to the slaughter on Cielo Drive. The victims there were random victims. But why did the 4 persons from Spahns Ranch feel they had to commit murders? In the case of the persons who actually went to Cielo Drive, there was no legal reason to answer that question. 2 of the persons involved in the crime were linked to the crime scene by physical evidence, fingerprints, and the other 2 admitted that they had participated. Thus, their criminal intent was demonstrated. But there was a legal reason to answer that question with regards to a fifth person who was not present when the people on Cielo Drive were slain. That person was the oldest member of the group living at Spahn's Ranch, Charles Manson. And the reason a motive was needed for Charles Manson is because from the moment the identities of the killers became known, it was assumed and reported that Charles Manson, as the oldest person in the group, was in total control over everything those other group members did, including committing the murders. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What part did Charles Manson play in planning what took place on Cielo Drive the night of August 9, 1969? Where was he during the period between when Beausoleil was arrested and the murders on Cielo Drive? He was pretty much on the road. It is known that Manson left Spahn's Ranch for Northern California in a bakery truck on August 3rd. Gary Hinman's body was discovered on July 31. I could find nothing on newspapers.com about a body being found on Old Topanga Canyon Road around that time, and although I surely might have missed some kind of local reporting, in any case, the persons at Spahn Ranch didn't see much news media, so it is likely that no one there knew that the body had been discovered. Gasoline credit records indicate that Manson was in Lucia, California on August 4th and 5th. He spent the night of August 5th at or near the Esalen Institute, almost 300 miles north of Spahn's Ranch on California Highway 1. Again referring to gas purchase records, Manson was in San Luis Obispo on August 6th, the same day, coincidentally, that Bobby Beausoleil had been arrested in that same area. And then he was in Chatsworth, where Spahn's Ranch was located. Did Manson learn of Beausoleil's arrest while at Spahn's? Beausoleil was arrested at 10:50 that morning and was booked into the LA County Jail on a murder charge on August 7th. When did he contact the people at Spahn's Ranch with the news of his arrest? By 6 p.m. on August 7, Manson was 10 miles south of Oceanside, California, where he got a traffic ticket. He spent that night in the truck in San Diego before returning to Spahn's Ranch at about 2 p.m. on August 8th, the afternoon of the night of the Cielo Drive murders. By then, everyone at the ranch knew about Beausoleil's arrest, and they were actively thinking up ways to deal with the situation. That night, 4 individuals from the ranch ventured into the city and killed all the people at 10,050 Cielo Drive. Was it just a coincidence that the slaughter on Cielo Drive happened just days after Beausoleil's friends at Spahn's Ranch found out that he had been arrested? No, it wasn't. The murders on Cielo Drive were a reaction to the news of Bobby Beausoleil's arrest. And why did the people at Spahn's Ranch react the way they did? Because that standard of commitment and action had been set by Charles Manson when he shot and thought he had killed Bernard Crowe in order to protect his people. But that just explains the level of the reaction. It doesn't explain the dynamics leading up to that reaction. We are going to look at those dynamics in future episodes of this podcast. But before we do that, there are more incidents of violence which need to be visited here, starting with the murders which occurred on Waverly Drive on the night of August 9-10, 1969. That night was a much more complicated affair than the previous night at Cielo Drive, and it will be the subject of the next installment of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. This has been the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast, the podcast dedicated to the truth about the Tate LaBianca murders, Charles Manson, and more. The views expressed on this program are solely those of the individual speakers, and they do not necessarily represent the thoughts, ideas, or opinions of any other persons, either living or dead. Visit our companion website at www.goodbyehelterskelter.com. There you can find more information about this podcast. Also, check out the Goodbye Helter Skelter Facebook page for information on upcoming programs. And let us know what you think by way of contact@goodbyehelterskelter.com. We will address any comments, questions, or concerns on future installments of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast.